In this video, I'm going to be showing you the line that I'm advocating against the Rossolimo in my new chessable course on the anti-Sicilians for black. That's just been released and it's still on introductory offer. So I think for the next 4 days, you can get the course, full course at a bargain price. Don't miss out. So the course covers all those lines in the Sicilian where white doesn't play d4, so it's all those closed lines. And thinking about the Rossolimo, when I'm talking to people about the Sicilian, they say to me, yeah, I love playing the Kalashnikov, I love playing the Sveshnikov, but I have a problem playing against the Rossolimo, and I can understand why. I've played this opening with white since I was a teenager, and also faced it as well. And I understand this is a really dangerous system. Very simple reason. White is getting castled quickly and can start to put pressure in the center, build a strong center. Black, on the other hand, well, look at these pieces. They're all on the starting blocks. It's going to take black some time to bring the king to safety. In the meantime, white is basically starting the middle game, and it's very difficult sometimes for black to combine developing and bringing the king to safety with countering what white is doing in the center. Now, the most popular moves against the Rossolimo are e6 or g6. A lot of theory on those, but I still see so many games, quick games, where black basically doesn't manage to deal with the problem successfully. So that's why I'm recommending knight f6, and this is a move that I've played for years since I was a teenager, and I've found it pretty successful. Now, what's the rationale behind knight f6? Black is attacking that pawn straight away, and in dealing with that attack it actually cuts out quite a few options for white. So white can either push with e5, but the knight is very safe on d5 and often just swings back to c7. So for example, these lines are very comfortable for black. Or there's knight c3. Now, in playing knight c3, you'll notice that one of white's main plans here, which is to play c3 and d4 and build a big center, immediately that's ruled out. So you can see that attacking that pawn straight away actually reduces white's options. It cuts across white's plans. The other thing is, black is simply bringing a piece out very quickly. And the plan now is to play g6, bishop g7 and get castled. So that's the big idea. It's actually just rapid development. Here, g6 and bishop g7. So black just follows the program. Get the king to safety as quickly as possible. Here, one of the main lines, I should say I'm following a game between Vidit and Lee. So Vidit Gujrathi and Lee Chao. A rapid play game played in 2018.
Oh!
Here white castled. One of the other main lines is to push the pawn, push that knight. Don't worry. And you can see that pawn is attacked, so white exchanges here. We take with the d pawn and that frees the bishop. And this knight can be pushed around and you try to trap that knight here. But actually black gets tremendous counterplay here. And that knight rejoins the struggle by coming to f7. In this line, often white castles queenside. And then that becomes a really interesting fight. Very double-edged. But I think black's chances are absolutely fine there. So that's the other way to play for white. You know, white can play aggressively, but actually I would welcome that. Here, white castled. So this is a much tamer way of playing the position. So black just plays bishop g7, is ready to get castled. And now e5. So is black sort of losing time, being, you know, with this knight being pushed around? Not really, because e5 doesn't actually help white develop. That's the thing. You might think that this looks a bit funny, but actually this knight on g4 is absolutely fine. So first of all, that pawn is attacked. White needs to exchange on c6, and we recapture with the d pawn. That's important to free this bishop. It also opens up the d file, so that it's hard simply for white to advance here. Rook e1 defends the pawn, and black castles. You see, on every move, black has just been concentrating on getting that king to safety. And after just a few moves, black has managed to achieve that. And don't underestimate that really is an achievement, because I see so many games where black gets blown away because the king gets caught in the middle. So this is the good news about this variation. Rapid development. d3. Of course, it's possible to push the knight straight away. The knight is coming back here. So d3. Knight h6 anyway. Now I've thrown a lot of paint on the board here. So let's interpret this. So first of all, in bringing the knight back to h6, actually makes room for the bishop to come to g4. In exchanging off that knight, it means that this black knight can head to d4, and that's a wonderful square for the knight, the outpost. Therefore h3, so that takes away this square from the bishop. That's sound, because actually, I mean, it's great that this bishop is free to come out here. But it would certainly help black to exchange off, because black's position would be a little less cramped. And now we see point number 2 to this knight swinging around here. It's going to bounce out to f5 and then to d4. So in fact, it's simply not a problem that this knight gets pushed around, because it's actually heading for a beautiful square, the outpost on d4. So it's supported by a pawn, supported by the queen. And that actually just is a real pain for white to deal with, as we'll see. Knight e4. So white uses the little bit of space created by the pawn to bring the knight to a nice central square and attacks the b pawn. So b6. And bishop f4. Bishop develops. The other way of developing is to play b3 and bishop b2. Knight d4. There's no need to develop this bishop yet. Let's find out how the structure is changing. We don't yet know whether this bishop belongs on b7, a6, e6 or f5. But what we do know is that we want to bring that knight to this beautiful post on d4. So here white has a choice. It's hard to live with that knight on d4 because it looms over into white's position. It's a beautiful piece. Either white is going to have to exchange that off or push it away with c3. If the knight's exchanged, black has quite a pleasant choice. You can either play pawn takes and then c5 and put the bishop on the long diagonal. Well, that looks pretty tasty. That's not bad. In fact, in this position, you also play queen takes. I quite like that, actually. So this queen is hitting a couple of points here. And if c3, then the queen just nudges back. And look, white's d-pawn is now vulnerable. It's no longer protected by the pawn on c2, and black has a natural plan of putting pressure on the pawn. So this is what happens when you occupy the outpost. There are consequences. Now in this game, Vidit decides to play c3. So forces the knight to move. The knight could come back here actually. But Lee plays in a very simple way, just exchanging. And then plays bishop e6. Bishop's on a fine diagonal. And black has a clear plan of just doubling on the d file and putting pressure on the pawn on d3. It's very hard to imagine how white is possibly going to build any kind of initiative on the king side while being tied to the defense of that pawn. Queen e3, so that takes control over this diagonal, fair enough. Now queen d5, interesting move. So this queen heads up the board looking at all these pawns and preparing to double on the d file. Very nice. You could also just play queen d7 and bring this rook into the middle, and then you can actually, you have to prepare it well, possibly prefaced by rook e8, but you know, you could look to play f6 at some point, or rook here and bishop here, and then play the pawn to f6. But queen d5, very interesting move. Feels very natural to me to operate on this semi-open file. White plays c4 just to push the queen back. Could go to d4. That end game feels comfortable to me. But queen d7, very natural as well. Wants to keep the queen on to put some pressure here. Bishop h6, so Vidit exchanges off one of the bishops, which is strategically seems fine. Rook d8, putting pressure on the d pawn, so this is really logical. Bishop's exchanged and the rook comes across to defend the pawn. And now queen d4, so we can see how black has managed to exploit the fact that this pawn has advanced, which did take away the d5 square and close this diagonal. However, it means that black can now use the d4 square, which is really nice. Exchanging would give black such an easy position. Rook comes to d8, and it's quite possible that black is going to be able to use the pin to take pawn c4.
With Target Circle Deal of the Day, discover different deals every day.
Vidit therefore avoided the queen exchange, came to g5 to attack the pawn here, which was defended. But that queen is a mighty piece, so it's threatening to take on b2, so knight c3. But that's really looks like a concession. That knight has dropped back, and yeah, the queen is looking good here. Got to watch out for rook e4, and then the queen is trapped. Okay, first of all, h6, attacking the queen, which comes back to g3. So again, watch out for rook e4. So bishop f5, okay, very logical. Looks at the d pawn and covers the e4 square. Rook d2. And here is where black really starts to take the initiative. And it's quite a common move in this line, actually. So long as black has control in the center, then you can get away with g5. You can see that the queen covers these important squares. So it's not possible for white to hit out with moves like h4. And this is a really nice move. It means the bishop can drop back here. So it's not going to be pushed off this nice diagonal looking at the pawn. Now here Vidit makes a mistake. This is not an easy position for white, actually. He should have played knight e2. But you know, matters are not so clear after queen h4. You know, this endgame is actually very pleasant for black with this idea. And if queen f3 attacks this bishop, so pawn sack, but black's pieces are very active, and g4 is a nice move. So black would like to simply break open the g file, and well, you never know. Could be possible to bring the king across, play rook here at some point. Yeah, I know that's attacked, but you get the idea. Sometimes it's going to be possible. In any case, queen f3 played, and that's a mistake because after queen f4, well, clearly it's not possible to take here because the rook is on. And black has a really nice initiative. Again, if queen d1, this move g4 I really like. Opening up the g file, the king can step across and rook g8. So Vidit exchanged queens. But that's exactly what black wants. Now the position is really stabilised, and it's quite clear that white has huge problems in the position. And in fact, the d pawn has gone, and that pawn has gone as well. So black is a pawn up here. I suspect that Vidit was thinking, well, maybe I can get some play on the king side. So he played b3, bishop d5, rook d1, attacks the bishop, e6. Wow, super solid. Remember, white exchanged off that light squared bishop pretty early on in the game, and that's left this bishop without an opponent, and it's an absolute monster. I mean, clearly exchanging here would be rather beneficial for black, but that bishop's beautiful. So Vidit is trying to stir up trouble on the king side, but it's just too slow. Really simple plan for black: a5 and a4, cracking open the a file, and this clump of queenside pawns is gonna roll through. That's another pawn. The bishop comes back. I mean, it's actually a terribly simple game. You know, black's strategy has been very obvious. Okay, the king prudently steps back a square, but now it's just time to push those pawns. It's not sophisticated, but then again, it doesn't need to be. And this is completely winning. There you go. Pawn queens on the next turn. Now, this was not a spectacular game, but that's how I like it. You know, this is a sound variation for black. And very often you get a similar kind of pawn structure in these lines. Let's just take it through to here, where this knight bounces round to the outpost on d4. So, you know, strategically, I think the plan is very, very clear what black is doing in these lines, and that I really like. As I said, it can get much sharper in other positions where white goes for this line and plays g4 and then attempts to castle queenside. But I think black is doing pretty well in those variations, actually. And, you know, with the two bishops, this bishop coming out here, I think, you know, you can be very optimistic about those variations. But yeah, the whole point is that after knight f6, you're forcing white to react quickly. And it